Happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday, February 9th, 2021, and welcome to another Tuesday with Thom. Tuesdays with Thom, of course, is brought to you by our partners, the Best Girl Consulting Firm. Best Girl customizes solutions to issues of leadership, access and inclusion, economic development, and communication. Best Girl creates the solutions that fits your needs. First of all, let me say thank you to everybody all the comments about my brother-in-law, Big Emmett, who passed. He was a good, solid human being, and we appreciate all the comments from everybody over the past few days. Thank you very much. We loved him dearly. Okay, so today, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker are here as our roundtable guest, and our G-list guest is Georgia's Supreme Court Chief Justice Harold Melton. We're honored to have him here, and we're looking forward to chatting with his honor. You got that, right? We're honored to have him. We're looking to chat. Okay, good. All right, so let's move along through Black History Month. I got a few Black history facts that you may not have known. This month, in 1867, the Augusta Institute is founded in Augusta, Georgia. It later moved to Atlanta, and in 1913, it became Morehouse College. In 1920, Andrew Rube Foster organized the first Black baseball league, the Negro National League. I am looking forward to going to visit the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. In 1927, the renowned actor Sidney Poitier is born in Miami, Florida. In 1964, he became the first African-American to win an Academy Award. This month, in 1990, Nelson Mandela is released from a South African prison after 27 years as a political prisoner. In 2018, Black Panther, based on the Black superhero comic, opens to incredible, amazing box office success. It has done around the world $1.344 billion. Some February birthdays include Roberta Flack, born in 1937, the late great actor, dancer Gregory Hines, born in 1946, and the fat man himself, Anton Fats Domino, in 1928. Mary Wilson, one of the founders and original Supremes, the girl group, passed away this week. She was 67 years old. If you recall, the Supremes were a Motown girl group. They dominated the charts in the 1960s. They had a host of chart records. They became one of the best-selling girl groups of all time. They had 12 number one hits on the Billboard Hot 100, the record for the most number ones among American groups. The Supreme hits included classics like Where Did Our Love Go?, Baby Love, Come See About Me, Stop in the Name of Love, Back in My Arms Again, I Hear a Symphony, and You Can't Hurry Love, the Supremes. So let's go to our roundtable guest, Barbara Wallace Edwards. Barbara, how are you this morning? Or are you there?
I'm here, Thom. How are you this morning?
I'm doing very, very well. What's going on with you?
Well, Thom, I watched the Super Bowl on Sunday. Really excited about two former Auburn players who were winners. I was pulling for the other team, Kansas City, but that's okay. I'm glad that our former Auburn team players won the Super Bowl.
So you kind of you were halfway happy.
Yes, I was halfway happy. Absolutely.
Okay. I didn't know you could be halfway happy, but I guess you can be halfway happy if you don't bet.
Absolutely. That's it. I never bet, so I'm always halfway happy.
Okay. Our next guest is Michael Walker. Michael is the president of the Walker Agency, a full-service insurance broker. Michael, this morning.
Hello, I'm here, Thom. Good morning to you. Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
Good to be with you all today. Like Barbara, I was watching the Super Bowl with interest and with mixed feelings. I always support and root for any former Auburn University alumni that are playing in the NFL or the NBA. So I was happy for Carlton Davis and Jamal Dean to get some Super Bowl rings from that standpoint.
I'm curious, what round did they go in?
if I recall, I think Jamal Dean went in the third round, and I think Carlton may have gone in the second round. They both left early as juniors with a year to play.
Okay. And what's happening in your world, Michael?
Well, one thing I want to point out to everybody is that, COVID vaccinations, they are certainly front and center of everybody, but there is a warning that's being sent out by the Better Business Bureau asking consumers, do not post photos of your COVID-19 vaccination cards on social media, because there's been an uptick in scams and they are concerned about potential identity theft. They are asking you that if you want to let everybody know that you have your vaccination, just maybe post a sticker, but try to avoid getting your card up there, because people are scamming and creating different scams and making fake ID cards and selling them.
So let me ask you, so that you get an ID card when you get a COVID shot?
Yes, they're going to start to hand out cards when you get your COVID shot, so that, like, for travel in different places, in particularly travel, you can show that you've been vaccinated and when you got vaccinated and what have you. So it's really just like in healthcare, it's personal identification information. So it's a warning not to do that, because it has your date of birth, all of this personal information, and then your scammers are taking that information and then creating fake vaccination cards and selling them to other people. So that's going to really cause issues for everybody.
Okay, that's something I didn't know.
So sad.
Well, that's kind of that's the world we're in right now. That's the world of the online world we live in.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, they are selling fake vaccination cards on eBay and TikTok.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Why?
You know, I generally end up kind of lucky avoiding that stuff, because I have a no new password rule. I don't get a new password to anything until I get rid of an old password to something. I got enough passwords, so I'm getting by right now. So Barbara, you got some Black History facts for us this morning?
I do, Tom. Do you know who the first Black lawyer was? Do anybody know who that was?
I know who it was in Alabama.
The first Black lawyer was John Mercer Langston. He was he became a lawyer, passed the bar in 1854 in Ohio. He was actually the uncle of Langston Hughes. It's a very interesting Black history fact.
One of the first Black lawyers in Alabama was Arthur Shores.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I think we're going to have his daughter on at some point. But go ahead, Barb.
Absolutely. And the first Black senator was a gentleman by the name of Hiram Rose Revel. He the first African American ever elected to the U.S. Senate. He represented the state of Mississippi from February 1870 to March of 1871.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. All right. Okay. You got anything else?
More?
Yeah, we'd take another one if
share,
you got
I can go on and on. The one that I thought was very interesting, this is something I recently learned, that before there was Rosa Parks, there was a young lady by the name of Claudette Colvin, who 9 months before Rosa Parks became an activist, she didn't give up her bus seat. And they asked her why she didn't get up when she was asked to get up. And she said because she felt like the hands of Harriet Tubman was on one shoulder and Sojourner Truth was on the other, wouldn't let her get up. So I thought that was very interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've read that story. Michael, what you got for us?
Well, I have one, and this one was a very interesting one, in particularly because February is the month in which Abraham Lincoln was born, and the signing of the Emancipation Act and all of that to free the slaves. This is a little known fact. A young lady by the name of Nancy Liggins Costley. She was born in 1813, and I'm probably mispronouncing this, but it's Kaskaskia, Illinois. She was the first Black person freed by Abraham Lincoln long before he became president of the United States. And it happened when he was an attorney and she was fighting for her freedom. Illinois was an anti-slave state. However, legislation is one thing, but enforcing legislation is another. She was born into bondage. And as a result of being born into bondage, although she was in Illinois, she spent most of her life fighting for her freedom. And she only got it when an attorney at the age of 32 named Abraham Lincoln took her case to the Illinois Supreme Court and fought for her freedom. And she got victory in 1841. Unfortunately, you don't know much about her. She doesn't even have a marker on her grave. Her grave is somewhere between a muffler shop, a union hall, and a garage in Illinois, buried by asphalt.
Well, I hate this, but I'm sure there are quite a few of the history makers who don't have markers, maybe who were not even given proper burials. Tough situation. Hey, one final thing, going back to the Supremes. The Supremes got hired in Motown. They got turned down several times. So finally they decided they just go down and sit outside the building every day. They were 15 years old. They sat outside the building every day until one day one of the producers came out and said, look, we need some hand clappers. Can you guys come in and do the hand clapping for us? They said, of course. And they jumped up and ran in and did the hand clapping. And the rest is history, as they say, the Supremes. Okay. Anything else from either one of you guys?
No, that's it. It's great to have Black history. I guess one sad note, I heard this morning, and I think it was a state out west where people were actually asking a monastery school not to teach Black history. And they tried to get a waiver to have their kids exempt from doing that. And I find that here in 2021, not to want to know the history of all Americans, and America is supposed to be a melting pot, that there were parents trying to get their kids exempt from that. And I think that's a big problem in our culture and our awareness, not knowing the history of America.
Well, and Emily,
Michael,
let me get, Emily says that is occurring in Utah.
That's what I thought. I was going to say Utah. I just didn't want to be wrong. Yeah.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I was going to say, yeah, I think that's happening in locations right now, other states as well, that in some school systems, actually someone posted on Facebook just recently that in their particular school system, the parents were given options several years ago to have their kids opt out of Black history programs and anything that they were teaching regarding Black history. So they are actually having that option given to them today in some school systems.
Well, yeah, I saw some of that as well. And, if it didn't start in the last administration, it certainly was encouraged. And it's where we are. I had I was really friends with her dad, a lady, but I went to school with her. And her dad and I got to know each other, and he actually helped me when I was writing my book with research. And she sent me an email and told me what a great Auburn person I am and what I had been over the years, and thanked me for supporting politician that I don't support. And I basically just told her what I always say. I was raised generationally where your politics, your faith, and whatever money you had were private issues. And I still live by that. I thanked her for her compliments, told her that I believe that everybody can think what they want to think. And I did not support that individual. She emailed me back and apologized. So at least we were able to have somewhat of a decent conversation. And why people would not want history taught. History was one of my favorite subjects, and we certainly learned enough history that didn't include Black history. So I would think if we had some Black history every day, we would not have caught up with what we learned throughout, particularly our 12 years of elementary school and high school. Okay, anything else, guys? All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on to our best girl message of the day. Little M, you got it.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
All right, y'all got somebody new to do your commercial. Who was that? Whoever it was, he was good. I can tell you that. All right, let's go to the G list where everybody is a star. Remember, Hollywood has the A list, and here on Tuesdays with Thom, we have the G list. Okay. Our guest today on the G list is Georgia's Supreme Court Chief Justice Harold Melton. Justice Melton was appointed to the Georgia Supreme Court by Governor Sonny Perdue on July 1, 2005. Prior to joining the court, Justice Melton served as Executive Counsel to Governor Perdue. Before that, he spent 11 years in the Georgia Department of Law under 2 attorney generals, where he dealt with issues ranging from the creation of the Georgia Lottery Corporation to the administration of Georgia's tobacco settlement. Justice Melton received his bachelor's from Auburn University and his Juris Doctorate from the University of Georgia. He's a native of Washington, D.C., and currently resides in Atlanta with his wife and 3 children. Welcome, Judge. How are you?
I'm good. Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we appreciate you being with us. I'm gonna start you off with a good. I'm gonna throw you a good softball up there. So, how'd you go? Why D.C. to Auburn? What was there a connection?
No, there's an intermediate step there. I actually grew up in East Point and outside of Atlanta, and Marietta outside of Atlanta. So we moved from D.C. to Atlanta when I was 5. So it brought me a little bit closer to the fold. And then from there, it was just a matter of just checking out their programs, liking the feel of the campus. They offered a little bit of assistance that made it a little bit easier to pull off. I just like the feel of the campus, and everybody who I talked to who had gone to Auburn loved it. So,
and obviously you did very well there. I think you
had a great time. They were good to me, and hopefully I was good to them.
Good deal. So we talk about Black history, but I think you became the first Black SGA president. Can you talk me through that?
So I learned a couple of things while I was there. And the first thing that I learned was that I'm the type of person that needs to know what's going on around them to be content. And so I got involved in student government, and I've been in government since then. I'm the type of person that feels better knowing who's making the decisions and what are the dynamics that are behind all that without just reading it through in the paper. So I got involved and wasn't planning on moving up the ranks, but year by year, you look to see what you're going to do different than the year before. And I got to a point where I had to decide whether I was either going to run for president, which was the only logical spot for me to try to move up to, or get out of SGA altogether. And when I started talking to people, they thought it was a pretty good idea. And we generated a good bit of energy and had a great time running. And one thing led to another. And next thing I know, I'm president of the SGA.
I see that, and there's a smile on your face as you say that. So it must have been a pleasant experience.
It was a very pleasant experience. I was warned that it would not be. We had some folks from other schools within the state that thought that I was naive, thinking that that one, I could win, two, that it would not get ugly, but there was none of that. It was a one of the best experiences I've ever had. It was a great time.
Were you in a fraternity? And I asked that because generally the fraternities sort of control the vote, the SGA vote.
There were a couple of fraternities that I call early adopters. The Lambda Chi fraternity got on board real quick, and that was one of the more influential fraternities on campus. And the two people that I ran against were in fraternities, so it was new in that regard as well.
Okay. There was in 1971, I think that spring of 1971, I was a freshman, and there was a young man named Anthony Copeland. Yes. And Anthony Copeland he's vice president of SGA. You're familiar with him. Okay. Yeah, that was, I admired him. I'd see him walking around campus. It's like, man, that guy's the SGA vice president. You know, how did he do that? And he did.
I wondered about that, and I've asked about him, and not too many people knew what happened to him after he left Auburn. The best I heard was that he ended up in California someplace, but I think folks lost touch with him in general. Have you heard anything?
I mean, all of a sudden one day he was gone, and nobody knew where he was gone, what happened to him. I hadn't seen or heard from him until January of 2020. Out of the blue, he called me up, and I mean, I was so shocked. And like I said, I admired this guy because of what he had accomplished while he was there. He just said that it was tougher than it looked on the surface, and that he just got to the point where he didn't feel that it was working for him anymore, and he left and went to California. Matter of fact, it was a little different. He actually gave me like 3 pages of notes that I didn't ask for. He said, "I want you to know what happened," and he gave me those notes. He lives in California. I think he lives kind of in a rural area. Retired from the government. Worked in the government. Worked in San Francisco in the government and retired. And I have talked to him about coming back at some point. And the last time we talked, I don't think he's quite ready to do that. So
yeah, I would love to talk to him, frankly.
Yeah.
I have a lot of admiration for him and Harold Franklin, who was the first African American at Auburn. I've talked to Dr. Franklin, twice in the last year, and just fascinating to hear his story about what it was like at Auburn when they gave him his own wing to the dorm, and how lonely.
Yeah.
Base was just loneliness.
Yeah, I think you said 87. I remember when Bo Jackson won the Heisman. I think it was 85, something like that, and it was so far removed from the 10 years before when I had left there at 75. And I remember sitting there watching Bo get that Heisman, and I just could not stop crying. It just, the emotion of knowing about Mr. Franklin, Dr. Franklin, knowing about Henry Harris, James Owens, the guys who I was there with, it was an incredible moment, I guess, in our history, and which is one of the things we're talking about. Let me just ask you this, and then I'm going to go to Michael and Barbara. Speaking of history, you recently had a building named after you. Talk to us about that, and what was that like?
From one of the trustees one day and asked me if I would be agreeable to the university naming the student center after me. And it literally took my breath away. And in fact, what I thought she was saying when she was telling me this was that they were going to name a section of the building. And I was going to be very happy with that. But the more I understood, we were talking about the entire student center, which is a beautiful building. I just couldn't get over it. So that has happened.
Okay. What was that day like? When I know there was a ceremony, I saw pictures and all that. Walk us through that.
It was great. You know, it was limited in terms of numbers because of the virus, but I couldn't imagine it being any bigger. In fact, I don't think I could have handled it being any bigger. It was a beautiful day. We were outside. We had our distancing, and to have Ada Ruth as the current Black female SGA president as a part of the program, and then her mother, Miss Liz Huntley, who's on the board of trustees, who's the woman who actually spoke with me, the president of the university, Dr. Gouge, and it was just one of those wonderful days. But I tell you, there's always a reality check when you have something like this. So here I am on the steps of the building, and the letters are above my head, and I'm talking to let's just call them adoring fans of the institution. And it's a great celebration, but behind me are the doors to the building, to the student center. Inside are the actual students. And literally I would take 10 steps and go inside the building and walk into complete obscurity. So it's almost comical. The kids would look up and say, "Oh, there's somebody," and they put their head right back down.
Yeah, that's sort of how history works. And we appreciate it afterwards, we don't appreciate it while it's going on. Let me bring Barbara and Michael back on for some questions, and then we'll come back. Barbara, you got some questions you'd like to ask the judge. Judge, I hadn't even asked you about judging yet, so we'll get to that. Go ahead, Barbara.
I do. Good morning, Judge Melton. How are you this morning?
I'm well. Good to see you.
Thank you. One of the questions I have for you is I read that during your second year at Auburn, you financed your tour to Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil as a basketball player and as a Spanish interpreter. That's a little known fact. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so yes, I went with Athletes in Action, which is the sports ministry of Campus Crusade, which is called Crew today. I don't know where you found that information. That's hard to find. Yeah, I played basketball all through high school, and one of my dreams in those days was to play college ball. And apparently I didn't practice enough, so that never really happened. But I did make it to the point where I was able to play with Athletes in Action, which was mostly college players, all but college players. And the way I was able to make it to the team was to bring a little extra, and that extra was interpretation, Spanish. I was an international business major with Spanish as my language, and that marked a highlight, the high point of my fluency. And from that point on, I lost almost every bit of my Spanish speaking ability.
Man, I was just gonna commend you for looking ahead and said, "Man, you're fluent in Spanish now, huh?" But,
right.
Not quite.
I lost every bit of it, and I told my wife that my kids would learn Spanish because as I relearned it, I would teach them, and they'll speak.
Mm-hmm.
I would, as I had 3/4 of Spanish, and this is how far I looked ahead. In that third quarter, first quarter I did great, second quarter I did great, and that third quarter I was struggling, and I went and talked to my professor, and I said, "Sir, I'm never gonna need this in the world anyway. So if I can just pass." Michael, you got a question?
Absolutely. Good morning, Chief Justice Melton.
Sir, good morning to you.
Thank you. First, a follow up on Barbara's question. What position did you play on the basketball team?
Well, on that team, I was a number 2 guard. In high school, I played everything but center.
Okay. Could you dunk?
I could.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, you're in the club then. I needed to make sure of that.
Let me tell you, this is one thing I hate about it. I don't think I hit my physical peak until like my freshman or sophomore year in college. And so my best dunking days were after I was really playing.
Okay. It happens like that sometimes. We'll call it a late bloomer then.
Yes, sir.
One question I wanted to ask you, as with you being in the legal profession, who was your idol or mentor in the law profession that inspired you to go on to do what you're doing?
So when I really did not want to go to law school. My father was the first person that suggested it. And I decided to go to law school at the University of Georgia for international law. That was the natural transition from international business to international law. I got a job in the Attorney General's office, and they stuck me in property tax. And they called me the Monday before I started on a Monday and said, "You're going to be doing property tax." I called a friend and said, "Look what they've done to me." And my friend said, "I hear your boss is a great guy." My boss turned out to be this white male from suburbs of Rome, Georgia, who didn't speak a lot, didn't say a lot of words at all. And he turned out to be one of the finest men I've ever worked for. I actually talked to him about a month ago. A wise man. I'd made no career decisions in life without talking to him. And I loved dearly. Never did talk a lot, but he sure did care about me and steer me the right way. And he's a man I just grew to love. His name's Dan for me.
Okay, good. Follow-up question. In addition to having the student center named after you, and congratulations on that, there's also a scholarship in your honor that is sponsored by the College of Liberal Arts. I think Thom and I both are graduates of the College of Liberal Arts of Auburn.
And Emily.
Emily, could you tell us about the scholarship that's been established in your honor?
Sure. So one of the biggest challenges for Auburn, as you all know, is to increase its diversity on campus. There's a lot of talent out there, and there's a lot of competition for talent, but that talent often will follow the money. And Auburn just simply has not had a lot of money to offer to students, either from out of state or in state, to make the difference, to encourage the kids to go to Auburn. And so I don't even know who came up with the idea, but I do know a couple of people who were excited about it. And they asked if I'd be willing to lend my name to that. And the answer was, of course. Not only would I be glad to, I'd be honored. And so it's all about trying to incentivize and bridge the gap that students need to have filled to consider Auburn as a viable option. And I believe once they're there, Auburn has a lot to offer. That our students coming there that we're trying to recruit will have a lot to offer to the student body and the student experience as a whole. So it's a win on both sides.
Let me. I know that, and I don't know if you followed this, Judge, but the university is very low in its number of African American students. That has become an issue. That and the naming of the buildings. So it was interesting when your name came up for the building, and there in other schools, I think talking about taking names down. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, on naming buildings, I commend the university. They realized that there were no African Americans or anybody of any other diverse background who had buildings named after them, and they realized that was mainly a product of the formula. The formula for having a building named after you is write a big check, and that obviously limits your population. And then you had some people who had long-standing history, maybe as dean of students or something along those lines. But they they tried to break the mold and do something different, and I appreciate that. I'll tell you that in the initial conversations I had with the university, my first question was, you know, my experience was so positive. You saw me smile talking about my campaign for president. And my first question was, what about the Harold Franklins of the world? And I was really pleased to hear that he was already on their minds and already on the radar. They told me the story about how one of the investors had looked into the story of him not getting his actual degree and called him. They actually visited him and asked him if he still had his. They called him back to the university, had him defend his actual thesis, and gave him a degree, a real degree, not an honorary degree. And they were set to have him walk across the stage at graduation in COVID. But he did deliver to him his actual degree. But the point is, he's very much on their mind, and I don't think they're honoring him and giving him the respect that is due to him. But all this matters, and Auburn's a great place. It's a warm place, and they're doing what it takes to reach out and to heal wounds and to show who they are.
Barbara?
I do have another question for you, Justice. Following graduation from law school, I read that you accepted a position in Alabama. You returned to Alabama and worked in the governor's there. Tell us about that time and the positions, the roles you served in the governor's office here in Alabama.
So, yeah, that was actually right when I was winding down my time at Auburn. I had a friend who was running for Congress, and he had been on Governor Guy Hunt's staff. And I called him to say congratulations, and he said he was about to call me because he wanted to see if I would be interested in taking his spot while he was campaigning. And so I went down to Montgomery and visited with Governor Hunt, and they offered me the job as Director of Youth Affairs. And from there, my job was to handle constituent calls, to go around the state and speak on behalf of the governor. But my main responsibility was to coordinate a youth exchange program to the former Soviet Union. So we took two groups of high school students to the Soviet Union. I got to go on the last trip and spend 3 weeks visiting 5 different cities in the Soviet Union, right around the time of Glasnost and Perestroika. So it was a historic time to be in the Soviet Union, and had a great time working with the state there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Michael, you got another question?
Yes, I do. But right before I get to my question, we have a question from our audience. It's from Joyce Gilly Gossam. She says, sometimes just because something is legal doesn't mean it is the right thing to do. As a judge, how do you balance the two when deciding a case, or as a justice providing opinion?
All right. So, tough question, good question. In terms of what we do as justices on the Supreme Court, we have as our primary function to define and articulate what the law is, and not to make up the law. So, yes, it's true that not everything legal is the right thing to do, but somebody has to define what is that which is legal, and that's what our job is, and that's the space we play. So, we can't write law based on what we feel intuitively or what we want to have done in this particular case, because what we write goes out to 11 million citizens in the state of Georgia, and it governs the circumstance that we are writing for and all the ones we hadn't thought of. So we really have to define the law with discipline and with rigor, and that's what I believe we try to do.
I got a question for you, and this may be, you may have somewhat just touched on it, but you have an issue like Black Lives Matter, and I don't know if that's something that's a pending case in front of you guys that maybe you can't talk about or what have you, but how does that affect what you guys are doing? I mean, again, I know you have to deal with the law, but you have these movements all across the country. How does it, or does it affect what you guys are doing?
So we're the umpire that calls balls and strikes. And sometimes when you call the balls and strikes, nobody's paying attention. Sometimes you call balls and strikes, it's World Series, ninth inning. And so the pressure is up and the attention is there, but the job is the same. We have to call balls and strikes. The Black Lives Matter movement at its core has something that we've been pushing for as a society all the while, and that is it's a demand for the rule of law. It's an insistence that the rule of law apply to everybody fairly and squarely without regard to wealth, race, who you know, but based on the law. And in fact, that's a lot of what the civil rights movement was. It was an insistence that everybody have access to the constitutional promise of equal rights and equal protection. And so it's not a demand for anybody who has enjoyed more rights not to all of a sudden have less rights. It's not a demand for people who have experienced injustice to share injustice on others. It's a demand for equal rights for all. So we want more justice for everybody, not less justice for anybody.
Okay. All right. Barbara?
I think Michael had another question. I'll let him go first.
Okay. Well, thank you. My question is this, sometime there is a definition that defines a case that's been on the books for several years or even decades. And then there's the case that's currently pending, and the outcome is based on what's been on the books. And then the definition on how to rule that on that particular case is changed in midstream. And that totally changes the outcome and penalizes the person that was operating on the former guidelines. How do you reconcile that? Because now you're punishing the person that was in position of strength based on the way it had been done. And then all of a sudden the Georgia Supreme Court comes up and comes out with a new definition. And then the judge who had been ruling all along in that person's favor, all of a sudden flips the switch just because a new definition comes out.
Well, if you can unravel that knot, if I could do that, I wouldn't be just a Supreme Court justice. I'd have I don't know what I'd be. You're stepping into some ground that the law professors and law review articles wrestle with and have wrestled with and will continue to wrestle with. There's a lot of theory about stare decisis, and when you are clarifying the law, are you clarifying the law, or are you coming up with something new? And when you're coming up with something new, is it really new, or are you really discovering what was there all the while? And so you can get all into these layers of analysis. But there are times when a case signals the time or the opportunity to change the direction where the law has been, based on an assessment that the previous law just wasn't right for whatever reason. And there's a whole analysis that goes along with stare decisis. And stare decisis says, we basically follow the law, or follow the decisions that we made before, but it doesn't mean that you always follow the decisions that were made before. There's a whole 4-point analysis as to when you decide to make a change, and a lot of it goes into the reliance interest, is what you're talking about. People have lived their lives with this understanding, and now you're talking about doing something different. Some of it goes to the workability of the previous analysis. Maybe it was on the books, but nobody could ever figure it out, so you had decisions going all over the place, and so it wasn't workable. And so another part of it was whether the previous analysis was well reasoned. Sometimes somebody just came up with something, and then you have to now say, well, this has never really been thought out, and it's getting us in trouble. So now we got to clean it up. I will tell you. So there are also times where there are new decisions that come out that work in favor of what a party is arguing for, but they don't get the benefit of it. So it works both ways, and there is no good answer to how you structure this. One of the things I did learn when I was working for government in Alabama, and it applies wherever you are, whoever believes that man can solve his own problems has never worked in government. Because one of the things you do in government is you paint with broad brushes and you make decisions starting with a certain point in time. And whenever you make a delineation, there's somebody right on the cusp of it that doesn't get the benefit of it. And there's just no good solution to it.
Okay.
Judge, as I think just back to Auburn and the campus, and I'll describe it as a quiet unrest that's sort of on the campus right now amongst the students and some of the alums. Would you welcome the opportunity to go to campus and speak to the Black students and maybe have a conversation with them? I think it would be great to hear from different perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And I had a visit. I was asked to speak to a class, and prior to, I had some time before that class time. It was an evening class. I reached out to the student group. I forget what it was the Black Student Action Committee when I was there. I forget what they're called now, but I reached out to them and we had a Zoom meeting, but it was only a brief 5-10 minute conversation in advance of their regular meeting, because they already had their time booked up. But I'm very happy and willing to do that at any time. I'll get in the car and drive over there and just have a full-fledged conversation.
When the young people, meaning students, and I'm going to say the older people, meaning alums, tell you all the things that are, quote, wrong, how do you address that? I mean, I know how I address it, so I'm just asking you, how do you address it?
So a lot of that was new to me. When I went to that visit, that's when I first heard a lot about what you're sharing with me now, and I've since heard a lot more. I still believe that the heart of Auburn is good towards all students. I believe. I do believe, as you know, it only takes one person to yell the N-word out the car window. I don't believe that's reflective of the Auburn experience. But if you get called the N-word, that becomes part of what your experience at Auburn was or is. I also look at Harold Franklin, Dr. Franklin, and say, don't let these isolated incidents taint your experience and what you can get out of Auburn. Don't go into a corner of the campus because somebody was rude to you or was racist towards you. Auburn has a lot to offer. You go out and get what you need to get out of it, and don't let these occasions of foolishness get in the way of what you need to get. And by playing offense, you will be a better person. You will get what you need to get, and Auburn will be a better place.
I think, yeah, I mean, that can go back even as far as when I was there. It was, you recognized at some point that when you play athletics, I mean, big time athletics, you recognize that there's certainly a business aspect to it. People, guy told me when he said, well, they're using us. I said, but we're using them too. We both got to come out of this better than we were when we got here. And so, yeah, I think when you're first generation, there's a lot about there's a lot more to education than just being book educated. Sort of my experience. Judge, you have anything you want to just address? I'm going to get Barbara and Michael one more round, but I wanted to make sure we hit on something that you might want to talk about.
Well, I love this. This is wide open. I mean, we can go anywhere. So whatever you have an interest in is good with me.
Okay. Barbara, you got anything else?
I do. I have a question actually that was submitted by another alum.
Okay.
They said at one time the African American student enrollment at Auburn was near 9%. It has currently declined to around 5%. And Chief Justice Melton, what would you suggest the administration might do to increase those numbers of African American enrollment at Auburn?
So when I was there, it was 3.6%. I recall. I think it was 560 something African American students. 9% is like the gold standard. 10%, you know, if you look at schools, colleges, and universities across the country, 9 to 10%, especially as you move up the U.S. News rankings, become really ideal. And frankly, this goes back to the scholarship question. What really drives the numbers a lot of times with the kinds of students, the talented students that Auburn is recruiting and seeking, and the kind of students that takes to get into Auburn, they have options, and without the money, they're going to go to other places. So we got to put our money where our mind is and our hearts are. And what you'll see is the schools that are achieving the 7, 8, 9% numbers are schools that are offering scholarships.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Michael?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. The first one would be, we're talking about student enrollment and the decline that's been steady. Also, there's another side of diversity and inclusion, and that's the business aspect. As you know, Auburn is a revenue generator there in the state of Alabama. And they are funded by taxpayers' dollars. 26% of the population in Alabama is African American. So they're getting these funds in, but there's no diversity and inclusion on the other side of doing business with minority businesses. I think if we're going to look at it from a complete standpoint, that needs to be addressed as well. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Sure, that's fair game. That's absolutely fair game, and something that you know, the university needs to be looking at. How you do business. There's certain things that the university has within its control, and I think your point would be, you know, to the extent that you have forces under your control, what are you doing, university, to represent who you are and who you say you are, and not just from a visible standpoint, but from a tangible standpoint to make a difference in creating opportunities and sharing the experiences on a broader scale. So sure, absolutely.
Okay. My last question is that if you were to advise a young African American that's interested in going into law and the practice of law, what space would you tell them to focus on or concentrate? What type of advice would you give them?
I would ask a lot of personal questions first about why they want to go into law, what their background is. My experience has all been with government, but that's who I am. If I'm talking to somebody who is a computer science undergraduate major, my advice might be a little bit different. I will tell them to go to a law school where they have the best chance of keeping their student debt at a minimum. That will increase their flexibility. I will tell them that they don't necessarily need to decide what their legal path will be. Just like anything else, get to the law school first. You may have an idea what you want to pursue, but keep an open mind, because you're going to see some ideas and see some things that you hadn't thought of, and be flexible and thinking about other things that you had not thought of. As with me, I could have made a career doing property tax, but you have to be open to opportunities that you hadn't thought of, and it worked out well for me. So I would tell them, you don't have to decide where you're going to go or what you're going to do specifically, but you do need to plan your next best step and view changes and make a good decision from that point. But I am definitely biased towards public service.
Do you have any plans to run for office?
I do not. I do not have any plans to run for office.
So you guys had a huge happening in Georgia with the Senate election, something that hadn't happened in years. Will it happen again? Well, who knows? Just your thoughts on the brouhaha over Georgia's not only Senate election but the presidential election.
Well, that's probably getting into an area where I need to be more careful.
Yeah,
I will say that many aspects of life move on pendulums. Things swing to the left and they swing to the right, and along the way there are lessons to be learned. And I think it's really good for both parties every time there's a pendulum shift to do some analysis and forensics about what is it that is causing the shift, what is happening, and to apply that to those who are losing in that pendulum shift, but also apply it to those who are winning in the pendulum shift. Because if you don't, that next shift will come much quicker than you would anticipate.
Agree. That's one thing about playing sports. You can win, and then you come in the film room on Monday, and the coaches are all over you because they say you didn't play well. And
Right.
They start telling you all the little things that you didn't do, but what they're looking at is, we won that game, but how do we continue to win? What things do we need to correct to continue to win? I'll just comment on something you said earlier. You guys had 560 African-American students when you were there. The university said we had 200. I always say they were hiding 100 somewhere because I never saw more than 100. And what was really, I've thought about this for a long time, but what was really, and I don't know that this was anybody's fault, but what really made the circumstance a little more difficult was that most of our 200 or 100, however many we had, students were commuter students. And so you didn't have the campus life experience that makes college special. They'd be there during the day, and then 3 o'clock in the evening, everybody'd be gone. And so it was, being a pioneer, you accept the fact that some things are not right. Some things are nobody's fault. That's just how the cards are dealt. So it was a very, very interesting experience. And you said you read the book, so I appreciate it. We got a few seconds left. Michael, Barbara, anything left for you guys?
I just want
Barbara, go ahead.
This is for joining us today. It has been a pleasure having you on our show today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to say thank you very much for agreeing to participate. It's been a great opportunity to get to know you and allow our audience to get to know you. It was a pleasure, and congratulations on the achievements. And I look forward to interacting with you in the near future.
Look forward to it.
Well, and Judge, I echo that. And my agents and all that stuff's over in Atlanta. So maybe at some point we can sit down and break a little bread and have a laugh or two.
I'd be honored.
Okay. All righty. So we appreciate it. That's going to be a wrap. My closing comment today is from Wendell P. Dabney. In 1907, Wendell P. Dabney established the Union, a Cincinnati paper whose motto is, quote, "For no people can become great without being united, for in union there is strength." And so that's our show for today. We thank you so much for being with us. It's been fun. We thank the judge. We thank the audience. We appreciate you all for being with us. I want to thank Michael and Barbara, and thank our G-list guest, Chief Justice Harold Melton. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl. If you're interested in having your business be a sponsor of Best Girl, get in touch with us. I thank Emily Hedrick, the communicator, our producer. Thanks Sean Jones, the organizer. And that's going to be a wrap. Enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe and peace.